2 minutes after 3, KNYO Fort Bragg, and as promised, here's Ezekiel Kralen's latest installment of his story about the two little dogs and so on and so forth. Friendship Warms a Chill, Damp Night is the title. Ezekiel Kralen wrote. Email correspondence, February 26th. Subject, another amazing meetup. Date, February 26th. Deke popped over unexpectedly last night about 10:30 p.m., though I say unexpectedly with caution, as that is usually his modus operandi. Before I even exited my hovel, I heard him start spitting and fuming over I know not what, but figured it has something to do with his smartphone or speaker and that I was to blame. As soon as I stepped out the front gate, I heard him vociferously whine. I'm ready to just drop him off here and be done with it. They're driving me nuts. Of course, I first thought he was on another tirade, being fed up with those lovely pups who were standing about quite calm and happy to see me. So my stomach clenched. My heart broke once again as I crouched down to give him hugs and pats. But I kept mum while he blustered on, and to my relief soon discovered he was talking about a rusty piece of hardware he called clippers. They were poking out of a large plastic bin loaded with marginally useful debris, except for a thick folded blanket for the dog's comfort. These clippers, by the way, are what one would more accurately call a 36-inch bolt cutter. Oh, I'm sorry. Dick calmed down then and waved a dismissive hand. He explained he's pissed right now because someone asked him to hold on to these clippers. He'd be back in an hour to retrieve them. But it's been more than 2 hours now, and the dude hasn't returned to their agreed-upon rendezvous, who might beat him up if the clippers are gone. I'm sick of walking around with them, he concluded. So relieved this had nothing to do with the dogs, I chirped, No problem, Deke. The guy's an asshole and put you in a difficult spot. I understand perfectly. Let me tell you, Watson, I can easily imagine how a bolt cutter would come in handy for someone who lives on the streets in any number of ways, but so help me glob if I can't come up with even one that won't land you in the clinker. He also had a tiny cart that was actually a toy car with a tall handle for a kid to push around. Some unidentifiable items were stashed within, though barely contained, on top of which lay his jumbo speaker set in such a precarious fashion it could slide off at any moment. How on earth does he lug that around without crashing it onto the concrete every few seconds? I pondered. And how does he manage to bring that heavy bin along, too? It doesn't have wheels. Be that as it may, it was another chill, damp night, and the dogs didn't have their sweaters on, nor did I spot them in either bin or cart. So I told him I have another pair upstairs, and would he mind if I brought them down for the mutts to wear? First he opposed me, extending his arms in a theatrical sweep. Nah, it's not cold out here. In fact, I'm sweating. Well, you know it's the meth that warms you up, I replied, and besides, you're wearing a sweater yourself and a thick jacket over that. He then dropped his arms, smiled at me, and said, Sure, go ahead. We'll be right here. Upon returning, I found Flacco curled up in the bin atop the folded blanket while her brother stood patiently nearby. I could see he wished to join her for the comfort and warmth, as he kept poking his nose around the edge, but saw there wasn't enough room for the two, as I gently raised her upper half with one arm to slide the sweater on. Lucky set a chunky paw onto the bin, preparing to leap inside, but Flacco quickly extended her hind legs over the open spot, so her brother pulled back. Now, Flacco, I whispered in one of her floppy ears that caressed my lips like silk. You know better. Share with your brother. And with that I nudged her a few inches forward. Though she resisted with all her might, she's stronger than you'd think, good doctor, and Lucky climbed in. It was indeed a close fit. They were scrunched together with not even a smidgen of space between, but they managed just fine and kept each other warm, with Lucky's head plunked upon her shoulder. However, I discovered a biker's helmet underneath one end of the blanket that pushed against Lucky's rump. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do for now. After all, it looked to me like their master was not going to hang around more than a few minutes longer. Can you get on the internet and price these for me? Deke interrupted, much to my annoyance, for I had just sat down to enjoy the hound's company. I don't get to see them very much anymore. Okay, I sighed and stood back up, whereupon he handed me an eyeglass case. I opened it to discover a pair of Prada aviator sunglasses in sparkling condition. They're $159 new, I said upon returning, eager to join Flacco and Lucky again. Really? He exclaimed. You'd think at that price I could get 50 for them, but the best offer I got so far is just 10. The richer a person, the cheaper they are, I replied with a nudge of my shoulders while caressing the sleeping quadrupeds. He then went on a roll about his living situation, how he has an appointment to register for general assistance and food stamps, but I'm only going to get $100 out of that. The rest goes to the shelter. That's okay so long as they don't force me to work. They're not, Deke, I explained. It's just a first step toward permanent housing, which will then make you eligible for SSI, which I think is $600 per month. How much they'll take out for rent, I'm not sure, but you'll still get food stamps. But you know how I hate appointments. I don't think I want to go through 50 appointments every month. That's what they have me down for. Don't be ridiculous. No, they don't, I replied with a roll of my eyes. Just 2 or 3 and that's it. You're doing fine. Stop worrying, for cripe's sake. Right, they're going to stick me in a building filled with crackheads and junkies dropping like flies from fentanyl. He suddenly burst out in a flurry of feigned desperation. I'll be alone, stuck in a room with no one to talk to and nothing to do. That's not what's going to happen, Deke, I replied with another roll of my eyes. It's not going to be paradise, but you'll be a lot better off and happier for these new changes in your life. Your destiny is a good one, and you have these wonderful dogs who love you with all their heart. Stop worrying, please. He then praised one woman who helps run the shelter, put his hands to his chest, one over the other, and said, "She told me she holds a place in her heart for me. She's very proud of me." "I'm sure she is. God bless her soul," I affirmed with joy. "I'm proud of you, too. I've never seen you look healthier and younger since you've gotten a bit of shelter, Deke. Give those folks a hug for me when you return to home base." He really glowed when I spoke those words, and my heart glowed as well, seeing how he's sticking with the program and has his own little cabin to call home. At that moment, another vagrant came by that Deke is friends with. "One of my people," he'd say. So he left me with the dogs to hold their powwow by the bus stop 20 feet away, by which time I realized he's probably going to linger around my building longer than I anticipated. Thus, I decided to make the weak canines more comfy by bringing down 2 sheets of cardboard and a king-size comforter I had stashed in my loft. The dogs attentively watched as I laid down the cardboard, but didn't see fit to leap from their bin until I removed the comforter from the knotted trash bag and laid it down too. Then, and only then, did they eagerly climb out of the bin and onto the bedding, whereupon I folded the fluffy excess over their little bodies so they'd be bundled in warmth with yours truly seated alongside. Usually, whenever Deke drops by to hang out front, he prefers I stay inside while he visits with his amigos, but last night he seemed to enjoy my presence, didn't make a single gesture that I return hovel. So I was out there with the pups a good hour and a half while he spent time with his, quote, guests a little further up the block. Though towards the later part of our meet-up, when Deke was sitting near me and munching on a burrito some nice young lady offered me, and which I handed over to him, another houseless friend showed up and joined him in discussion. I decided then I should return hovel out of respect for his privacy with another, so I pet the doggies goodbye, then stood up and told him, "I'm going back inside now, Deke. Just let me know when you're about to leave so I can pick up the blanket." He said okay, and upstairs I went. Around a half hour later, he called me back down, requesting I bring him a black marker so he can, nigga rig a pair of sneakers. I've never heard that term before. When I came back downstairs and handed him the marker, he said, "It's midnight, so I may as well take the blanket now." I saw that his scant possessions were not yet bundled back up in bin and cart, so I told him, "You're not ready to leave for a while yet. I don't want to deny the dogs their comfort." "But you go to bed at midnight, right?" he queried. "Usually," I agreed, "but that's okay. I don't mind. Just call up to me when you're ready to go." He said okay, and 15 minutes later he did, then asked if I can give him a couple of kerchiefs, one camouflage, the other with swirly colors in it. "I don't have a kerchief with swirly colors, Deke," I replied while turning toward the gate. "This ain't the dollar store, you know." "I know it isn't. It's the pick-and-pay store," he quipped, and I guffawed as the gate closed behind me.